welcome to Di's Home and Garden. I'm Di and welcome to my channel. If this is the first time here, this is a channel about cooking. I like to cook a lot of recipes that I grew up with, recipes from my childhood, and I also love to garden. So I like to show you how you can use your produce from your garden, and also just to do garden tours and tips and tricks when you're out in the garden. So today we're going to be making strawberry jam. It's a great season for strawberries, and at the moment they're quite cheap to buy. So I've bought a load of them, and what better thing to do with a load of strawberries than make strawberry jam. So first thing we need to do is have a look at what ingredients we're going to be using. So here we go. These are the ingredients that we need. We've got strawberries, and we have hulled them and quartered them. At the back here we've got just plain granulated sugar, just plain white sugar. And then we've also got lemon juice. So I will put the recipe in the pinned comments, so you'll be able to follow it there. But just one trick, when you're making strawberry jam, what you'll find is, or any jam, what you'll find is that you can double the recipe, but if you enlarge it any more than that, it's not going to set properly. So if you want to double this recipe that I put in the pinned comments, that's fine. But if you have more strawberries than that, you need to make extra batches just using the double quantities and no more. Okay, here we go. Okay, the first thing that we need to do is to get our jars that we're going to put our jam into, and I've just put them in the saucepan here, and you can see in the bottom of there's a rack so that the jars aren't touching the bottom. That way when they boil they won't crack. So I'll just turn that on now, and what I do, I will bring that water to the boil with the jars and boil them for 10 minutes to sterilize the jars, because when we finish making the jam we're going to be putting it in sterilized jars, and we're going to be water bathing it, and that way it will last on the shelf indefinitely. I'd say use it up in about 12 to 18 months. It will last longer than that, but the quality of the fruit in the jam will deteriorate over that time. The flavour should still be there, but the texture might change. So I'd say use it within 12 to 18 months, and really you don't need to store it any longer than that, because jam season comes around every 12 months. So next time the strawberries are on special in 12 months time, you can make another batch again to last you for the next 12 months. So in that pot I've only put the jars. The lids I will do separately in a saucepan. So I'll just get those on and I'll be right back. So we've now got our saucepan of lids, and I'll just put those on to boil as well. So we've got our heavy base saucepan, and we'll just put all the ingredients. So first off, we've got all our strawberries, then we'll add our sugar, and we'll add our lemon juice. So I'm just putting the heat on medium. And what I found with this recipe is, even though it says that the fruit will break down, I like to give it a hand. So what I like to do is to use my masher, and as we go along and it's cooking, I'll mash it. So I'll just get that out ready to go. Right, now this is my big spoon. I call it my jam spoon. It's just a nice large wooden spoon. So I'm just stirring that over medium heat. Just until the sugar dissolves. And then once that sugar dissolves, I'll be turning the heat up a little higher. So we'll come back when that sugar's dissolved. Okay, so that's all dissolved now. The sugar's all dissolved, and we're bringing that to a rolling boil. Now, what can actually happen is the fruit may not break down. Most of it will, but some of the firmer bits don't break down as the jam's cooking. So what I like to do is to make sure that I have nice smooth jam, I use my masher and I'll mash the jam as it's cooking, and that way I know when it's finished we'll have nice spreadable jam without any big chunks in it. Now, I've got to get that out of the masher now. Now, this recipe doesn't say to use a thermometer. Normally I would use a thermometer and bring it up to 120 degrees and then I know it's reached setting point. This one just says to boil it for 10 minutes. And then it should be ready. But I always will give my jam the setting test. So to do a test to see whether it's set or not, what you do before you start to cook all your jam is to put some sauces into the freezer to make them very cold. And then once you think it's reached setting point, you'll just take a little bit of the juice like that, put it onto the saucer, wait for it to cool, and then push it with your finger, and if it wrinkles, then the jam is at its setting point. So when we're at that stage, I'll bring you back and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, that's been about 10 minutes now. I've got my cold saucer here, and I'm just going to take some of the juice off that, some of the syrup there, and put it on my cold saucer. So just a little bit in the middle there. And I'm waiting for that to cool down, and then once it's cool I will push it with my finger and see if it wrinkles. Our jam on our saucer has now cooled down, so now we're going to give it the test to see if it wrinkles. So we just push it away with our finger, and we can see there that there are slight wrinkles when we push it. And the other trick is that you can see it doesn't close up that gap that I made by pushing it with my finger. So the jam is at setting point. So now we'll put it into the sterilised jar. Right, so we've taken our sterilised jars out of the big pot at the back, and they're ready to be filled with the hot jam. So these are hot, and the hot jam can go straight into them. If they weren't hot, the jars would crack. So we make sure that it's hot. We just use our funnel there to put it in, and we just fill it to leave about 1 centimetre of airspace at the top. So we'll come back after I've filled all these jars. So there you have it, the jars have been filled with the jam. We didn't get enough to fill all the jars that I had, but I always like to sterilise a little bit extra than what I think I need, because sometimes I've found that I haven't judged it correctly and I actually need an extra jar or two, and I haven't sterilised them. So I always think if I sterilise them and I don't use them, that's no issue. So anyway, what we've made here, we've made 6.5 jars. This last little jar didn't quite get full, so that won't be going into the water bathing. That'll be going straight into the fridge to be used over the next few weeks. Now, with the other jars that I've done, what I like to do, or what we need to do, is this is just plain white vinegar in this bowl here. So I just put some onto a paper towel and I wipe the rims, just the top edge of the jars. And the reason for doing this is to make sure that there's been no spillage onto the jars, and that way we're going to be ensured that we're going to get a proper seal when we water bath them, and that will ensure that they will last. If we don't have a proper seal, well, the jam will spoil and it won't keep as it's supposed to. So I've got all different sorts of lids here. Let's see how we go with these. So these lids were also sterilised. This one goes on there. We just tighten them, not overly tightened, but not too loose either. So just give it a twist. Now, what I actually did was make two batches of jam. So what you can see in these jars here, that's actually 1.5 kilos of strawberries. Now we're going to place them into the water bathing. And that's just in the pot at the back there. So we'll just pick the jars up and put them into that water. Now we need to make sure that the water covers the lids by about 1 centimetre. So it looks like I'm going to be in luck. I've got the right amount of water in there. Of course, as I'm putting these jars in, the water's rising a little bit. And it's going to be just right. Right. So I'm going to put that on again. I'm going to bring that to the boil, and it's going to boil for 20 minutes. Then I'll let the bubbles subside. I'll probably leave it about 10 minutes, and then I'll lift the jars out to cool. Right, so that's been boiling away now for 20 minutes. So we're just ready to get those jars out. I'll just have to leave that sit for about 10 minutes, and then we'll get the jars out. Okay, 10 minutes has passed by, so now we can lift our jars out and put them onto a cloth. The cloth is there to absorb the water that comes off the jars, but also so that they don't get too much of a shock from touching a cold surface. Now, as these cool, we should start to hear a popping noise. And that popping noise is because the air inside that little bit of air gap that we left, that expanded while they were in the water bath. And as they cool, it brings down, it sucks in the lid. And so to test that they've all sealed properly, there should be a little bit of a dent in the lid, and we'll be able to feel that. If we can't feel it, it means that they haven't sealed properly. So what we can do is either re-water bath them, or we can just pop them in the fridge and use them within a few weeks, maybe a month or two. So that's it, all finished. We've got our jars of jam there. What I like to do is to cut some cloth. There they go. You can hear the popping start already. So I cut some cloth and I put that around. I tie it with a little bit of string. I'll put a label on it. The label will say what's in there and the date that it was made. And they make a beautiful gift to give out. Everybody always appreciates homemade jams and preserves. So these are an excellent gift. Or you can just use them for yourself.